to take my stand. Yeah, I am a roaring lamb. I am a roaring lamb, and the time has come to take my stand. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Donna Skell.
And I'm Tiffany Ross.
Welcome to Roaring Lambs. Have you ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Well, bad things happen to all people. And there's not really a good answer for it, but God has a way that He can use your story, no matter what, to bring joy and hope and encouragement to someone else. Our guest today has a story of tragedy and drama, and but God is using her story, and you're going to see how in just a moment.
This episode of Roaring Lambs is brought to you by LifeStoriesCompany.com.
Our roaring lamb today is a Dallasite. Her name is Shannon Dion. She's been married to her husband Eric for 37 years and has 2 children. And like I said, her story is not a fairy tale, but it's a real story with real heartache and real help. So Shannon, welcome to us.
Thank you.
Show
Thank
today.
you for having me here today.
Yes, we're glad about that, and your story is amazing, and we do want to start at the beginning. So if you'll tell us a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing.
I am a native Dallasite. When I was 5, my dad's work took us back east. He worked in New York City, and we had a home in Stamford, Connecticut. I spent all of my school-age years there. Neighborhood kids running around playing kickball in the biggest yard. There was a pond across the street. When it would freeze, we would all go ice skating on it. My parents believe in molding my character by having me rake leaves and shoveling snow. Mama wouldn't take me shopping in the summertime until I'd done the chores of dusting or whatever she deemed needed to be done. So we had dinner every night at the table together, said the blessing before every meal, and then Sunday supper was after church at the dining room table. So in many ways, it was just a very, very traditional for 60s and 70s age
Yes.
growing up childhood.
Oh, Shannon, you know what you described is just that Hallmark card. And I'm so grateful that many of us got to grow up in that era where the world just seemed safer and kinder and simpler. And so what a great foundation for you and your
Yes.
siblings. You have some
I had a sister.
Yes, a sister, that's right. And so that said, you had mentioned, coming home from church and having dinner, and so you all had church as a spiritual foundation in your home?
We did.
Yeah.
So Daddy was Catholic and Mama was Baptist, so Episcopalian was the answer to that combination. And I was baptized at age 2 at St. Matthew's Cathedral here in Dallas. That's where my parents were married. My sister was married there, and my husband and I were married there. It was family churches for all of us in that way. In Connecticut, we found a really charming, small, colonial Episcopal church. It had probably 20 pews, 10 on each side, very simple. And I grew up in that church. I sang in the kids' choir, participated in programs. My parents were active in leadership roles there. But with Mom and Dad both, the faith was somewhat personal. So I was always welcome to ask questions, and they would answer them, but they never gave me a dictate of what I had to believe, that this was left up to me to kind of figure out for myself as I grew up.
You know, I don't know if that was just your family or some of that might have been growing up in the Northeast. I did too, and I found the same thing. Faith was very personal. People didn't talk about their faith a lot. But you know, the Bible says, train up a child the way he should go, and when he grows up, he will not depart from it. So that was the case with you.
Very much.
And you actually went to SMU, Southern Methodist University. Tell us about that time in your life.
all of our family was here in Dallas still, so I knew eventually we would land back here, and I chose not to go to college back east. So I came down and started at SMU, and my freshman second semester, my parents called and said they were moving back to Dallas at that time, so we were all back together again. My sister was married in here and settled in. Began my first job out of SMU. I worked as a caseworker for the 3rd District Congressman. Met my husband, and we were married in 1984. We had 2 daughters. My husband, like me and my family, always believed family came first, so he never sought to leave the Dallas area for any reason. We were able to keep our family together and grew up. My daughters were 10 minutes from where Grandmom and Granddad lived, so my sister was 20, 30 minutes away. We were just all very, very close here.
Wow. Shannon, you mentioned, just how life was progressing for you. You went to college, met your husband, children, family was close. It just seems like this idyllic situation continued. And yet, mentioning your sister, there was a day that your family will never forget. Would you walk us through that?
So Eric and I had been married 4 years. It was before we had children. It was November 10th, 1988. Evil came to my sister Nancy's door. And this evil was in a person who kidnapped her, robbed her, and raped her. And that was, she started missing at 3 in the afternoon. Her husband came home at 6, noticed she was gone. The police started coming, the family gathered. It was a horrible experience, a horrible night. My aunts and uncles had a prayer vigil in a room. It was endless, and not knowing where she was and when was this horror going to come to an end. And thanks to God, be to God, in the early hours of November 11th, we got a call from the police that they had Nancy and that she was okay. I mean, she'd been hurt, but that she was okay and that we had her back.
What a terror to live through. Just, not knowing is the hardest thing.
Yes.
Not knowing if she was alive, what had happened, because you didn't know what had happened at first. I was so glad that they found her and that she was alive. And I know that during that evening, a lot of prayers went up to God. And that was a pivotal moment in your spiritual life as well, wasn't it?
It was. I'd gone through college and gotten married and still of faith, but not attending church, not really. Presence of the Lord wasn't something on my mind on a regular basis. And that night, before we had Nancy back, I just had to slip away. I was kind of trying to be the hostess. I had to do something. I was checking on my parents. I was pouring coffee, but I had to slip away. And I went upstairs and I sat on the foot of her bed, and I didn't have any sense that she was gone. It wasn't like there was a closed door or dark, empty feeling when I thought about her. And the words of Agnus Dei that we would sing in my church when I was a child, Lamb of God, take away the sins of the world, grant us thy peace, it's a repetitive chant, came to my mind. And that's when I didn't feel alone. The Lord was with me. I didn't know that Nancy was okay, but I didn't have a feeling that we weren't going to get her back. And that was confirmed when the call came, and the good work of a very diligent police officer. It was a true miracle. The people who were monitoring the phones in case there was a ransom call gave a big cheer when they heard. They didn't think we would get Nancy back based on their experience.
And I'm sure statistics would say most do not come back.
Correct.
So your sister is truly a miracle.
That was the first miracle that I witnessed, aware of in my life, yes.
And so not only did you become closer, and I know obviously the Lord will use pain often in our lives to draw us
Correct.
close to Him.
Yeah.
And so what a joy to have her back. I know that she, I'm sure, dealt with months and years of the trauma of that.
She did.
But yet another trauma happened with Nancy.
So, yeah, so it did. It took years for Nancy to get confidence. I mean, she wouldn't be alone. She wore an alarm around her neck for years.
Yeah.
But she did. She's very strong, and she got her life back and brought our niece into our family. She and her husband brought our niece into our family, and we were back living as we had. And I had my 2 girls by then. And then December of 2000, Nancy was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which back in the 20 years ago, it was a death sentence. And living for a period of time, it's not like today. They've made great strides. People are living years with pancreatic cancer now. Nancy fought hard, and she managed to live 2.5 years, and it was motivation to be with her daughter. But we lost her May 24th, 2003.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Losing a
Thank
loved
you.
one is so hard, and there's a special bond between sisters. I mean, you
Yes.
just grow up together, you watch your parents together, you talk about them together. It's just such a bond, and I know it was really hard to lose her, but that was a time also when the Lord communicated with you, when the Lord comforted you in a special way.
Yes, and I miss my sister to this day. Just as you said, I miss having someone to share those memories with. But in the middle of this illness, she would go into the hospital for procedures periodically, and she was in for one. And it was iffy. We didn't know if it was going to be successful or not, and if it was going to prolong her life with us or not. And just really anxious sitting in the waiting room, when all of a sudden a very new feeling of peace just washed over me. The anxiety was gone. I felt like she was going to be okay, and she was. But it was the Holy Spirit telling me not to be anxious.
That is so comforting to know, isn't it? That in those worst moments, He comes in, often like a flood, to just comfort and to assure us we're not alone.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of those seeds were planted by your dear mother and father when you were young to just teach you, pardon me, of spiritual things. And you saw those seeds growing. And speaking of your mother, I know the two of you were very close, and you lost her not long ago in a very unusual way. Would you
Yes.
walk us through that whole time with her?
So my daddy passed away from a stroke in November of 2015. They'd been married 61 years. So my husband and I lived 7 minutes away from the community where my mom and dad lived. And so we were very close. It was easy to get to her. We watched over her very closely this first year of widowhood, and were encouraged when she started getting back involved in Tai Chi and playing bingo and winning cheap wine and her activities. And we went on a wonderful cruise together in Alaska. She was very active. And so on Fridays, I would pick her up and we would go and get her hair done. And while she did that, I'd go grocery shopping for her. And then we'd go to the bank to get her cash. She'd tell how many 20s and 10s she needed. We'd go back, I'd put her groceries away, and we would say goodbye. And that's exactly what happened on Friday, October 28th, 2016. She kissed me goodbye. She was excited. My sorority sisters were in town, and being an only child, all of a sudden, she was always so grateful when I had my friends. And so I told her I would see her Sunday. I would pick her up at 8:30 Sunday mornings. She'd be sitting outside on a bench, and we would go to church together. Sunday morning, October 30th, she wasn't on the bench. So I called up to her apartment, and there was no answer. And so I parked the car and went in and told the young lady concierge something's wrong. And I went up, and the newspaper was outside her door, which was unusual, and the door was unlocked. And I went in, and actually the concierge found her before I did on the floor and said she's gone. And so I made the calls, and the police came, my husband came, and for 1 hour I grieved, as all family does when their maternal matriarch leaves them. When the funeral home came for her body, I had asked for her jewelry. And when I came out and they pointed, and they all were her wedding rings. And I was like, well, where's the guardian angel necklace? My sister had purchased guardian angel necklaces for us, and my mom and I wore ours all the time. And they said, there's no necklace. I mean, we looked all over, we couldn't find it. And as I started looking, I noticed other jewelry that she wore all the time was missing. I looked in her purse. The cash we had picked up on Friday was missing. Something was odd, something was wrong. And the police came back, and hours investigation and whatever, they left me that I was to understand my mother had died naturally, and someone had just come in and taken jewelry off of her cold, dead body and left her and robbed her of the other items. Well, something just didn't fit right. And so I did a open records request with the Dallas Police Department on the property. And through that, I discovered there had been 3 unattended deaths with robberies prior to my mother's in just a matter of months. And that set off alarm bells for me. And so I tried to engage with the Dallas media, the Dallas police. No one was interested in picking up the story or show a concern. I posted a Yelp review that I had on this establishment site, that I had concerns about security. People should be aware that 4 women had had this happen, 4 families had had this happen. And March of 2017, I felt like I just needed to get on with my life. I'd done everything that I possibly could. July of 2018, Detective John Hoffman with the Plano Police called me. He had seen my Yelp review. He told me he was on a task force investigating a serial killer who had gone in and smothered women and stolen their jewelry, and that my mother's situation had caught his eye. He gave me a name and asked me to Google it, and we made an appointment to meet the next day. As horrifying and it still is nauseating to think that's what happened to my mother, at least now things made sense. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. Pieces were coming together that had been missing in what happened. We met with the detective, we went through everything, and yes, it was determined that my mother was a victim. Her death certificate was amended, as were many others we found out. So we found out my mother was the 7th victim in her establishment in 3.5 months.
Wow.
And even after my Yelp review, there was a victim over a year later, which is very, very hard for me to carry. Yes, so Mama's death certificate was amended. It reads homicide smothering with violence.
You know, that's so sad, and I'm so sorry it happened
Thank
to
you.
your mother, but
Thank you.
I'm so thankful that you use such a hard, difficult, ugly thing to make good out of it. And I know that your mother would be proud of you too. That you started this organization called Secure Our Seniors' Safety. And what you found out over time were, there were 24?
Yes, there are 24 victims.
24 people that this same man went into all these different senior living facilities, snuffed out their lives with a pillow, and robbed them. I mean, that number is staggering. I'm sure at that point you had the police's attention and detectives' attention. And so walk us through what happened next.
Once it was verified, a Dallas detective recognized my pain and my upset, and that it was a very unique. I was told my mother passed away. I had 1 hour of that. Then I was told my mother died naturally, but she was robbed, and I had 1.5 years, 2 years of that. 2 years later, I'm told she was murdered. It's like it just keeps opening up a really horrible wound, and it gets worse every time it's opened up. So losing our mothers is a very unique experience that we've all had the same experience though. So this detective recognized it and he introduced me to a dear friend now, Lauren Adair Smith. I refer to her as my sister. And her mother was at a different establishment. She had been murdered in May of 2016, months before. And as I called Lauren and we started talking and recognizing this shared tragedy, we both also realized something had to change. This was unacceptable. By then we knew there had been numerous victims. The number wasn't up as high as it is now at that time, but we knew there were numerous and we knew this cannot happen to another family. Something has to change. And we did not want this to be our mother's legacy. Our mothers were had bigger stories than this. So we started kind of talking, and then come October, another now sister, Ellen French House, found me through her amazing Google skills and called me, and her mother had been a victim 3 weeks at the same establishment before my mother, and she was fully on board. And then in December, MJ, Mary Jo Jennings, found my Yelp review and reached out to me. Her mother had been a victim at the same establishment in August. So the four of us all were on the same page of we're angry and we are upset and we want our mother's friends safer than they were. And the industry wasn't going to make any changes. That had been made clear. So we needed to get some changes going, and that was the birth of it. We wanted SOS, but that had been taken, so we had SOSS, which we came in to secure our senior safety. And we are advocating for improved security measures and more awareness.
And you're taking strides with the law now and trying to pass bills. Where are you in that process?
So the Texas legislature meets every other year for 5 months. So you have a very small, hectic window to get things accomplished in the state of Texas. So we got through the first session. We were told we were very successful. We did get we took 4 bills down. We got 2 passed. They don't affect the industry, but they affect families who are victims of crimes and how things are handled through investigations. So we feel that's a step in the right direction. Plus we've had a terrific opportunity to learn. So we're going to work and build our network and hopefully increase awareness and go back in the 2023 session with more bills. Simply things like mandating background checks on employees and people who come on these established premises, sharing with residents what crimes go on in the buildings. We all say, if only I had known there had been unattended deaths with robberies, I would have told my mother not to open the door. But that information was never shared, and to this day, some of my mother's friends still believe she died of a heart attack. So we feel it's very critical to be open. That's our accountability and transparency are things that we are seeking. So we are hoping to network and get some strength and go back.
So I don't know if you're free to talk about this, but there was this one man who they traced 24 deaths to. He's in prison right now. And one of the ways that they traced it back to him was because he took the jewelry and sold it at a pawn shop. And I never realized, I learned this from my friend Lauren, your sister, that that when somebody robs, the police can go to these pawn shops and find the jewelry that is now for sale and trace it back. So can you share a little bit about this man and how he accomplished that?
So what we found out is there are pawn shops and then there are cash for gold businesses. And he went to the cash for gold businesses. Pawn shops, we understand, are pretty good about when you go in, they take your driver's license, they take pictures of the jewelry, they write a detailed description of it. So even if it's sold, the police can say, I want to see your records for the last month, and the paperwork is there. The cash for gold industry didn't do that, and so it was simply here, a swap. So one of our bills that we introduced was to make more spot checks on the cash for gold. We're just looking for deterrence, and hopefully by making the market smaller, there will be less incentive to rob people or for these places to trade in the business the way that they did.
And that bill was passed?
Bill was passed.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. That was one we were proud of.
Wow. And this gentleman, I won't say gentleman,
Criminal.
this person, criminal,
Criminal.
thank you, is awaiting his sentencing still.
Yes, so he has been indicted. There are 24 homicides attributed to him. Only 18 have indictments. But he is sitting, 13 of those were in Dallas County. As I said, 8 were at the one establishment where my mother lived. The trial is scheduled now for November 15th. And they are trying 2 of the cases. We can't try all 13 as much as we would like. That's not efficient. So we are looking forward to him having convictions, and then it will be life without parole.
So this man, how did he get into all these different senior living facilities?
He just walked right in.
He just walked
There
right
are
in.
pictures of him just walking
He
right
didn't
in.
pose as an employee? Or?
Wow.
He wore a blue button-down shirt, khaki pants, carried a briefcase, and if he was questioned, he said he was there to check for leaks.
So there really was no security. Now I know that when you visit a senior living facility, you have to sign in.
We believe that there have been a lot of changes. We aren't going to be proud to think that we had anything to do with it. COVID changed so much because people had to track. Our concern is with COVID, it's someday being handled, the old habits will return, and that lack of security will also return. And that's one of the things that we are very concerned about.
Shannon, thinking of your organization, and it's such a worthy and needed organization.
Thank you.
Not just the murders and the theft, but so often we see horrific video of
Yes.
seniors being just traumatized and beaten, really.
So we've are starting to expand our scope beyond just independent living, assisted living, nursing home care. Across the spectrum, all of these places need to be watchful and aware. So we're working with education. I had a dear friend to reach out and say, my friend's looking for a place for her husband, a stroke victim. What would you tell her? And I'm fortunate I have a 9-point document to share with things that you might not think about, but you should. When you're assessing, because they advertise resort-like lifestyle, fine dining, great activities.
Yes.
Well, okay, that's great, but what do you do if a stranger's wandering the floor? Do you tell the residents? Do you expect the residents to escort him off the property? Yeah, it changes across the board, and we're not going away.
Good.
That's great. That's a beautiful example how God used something that was hard for you, terrible for you, but He's using it for good. So I would love for you to speak straight to our audience. What words of wisdom would you give them about either seeking out a facility for their loved ones or the power of God in this whole situation?
Well, the professional person is going to tell anyone seeking a facility to ask the questions. Understand that you're going in and you're hearing a sales spiel. Ask the questions of what the security is. What do they do? Do they tell residents about things? Do they report when staff has acted inappropriately? When there is a problem, is there a meeting set with the families from the top management? There's one more story I wanted to share about Christ showing Himself. So May 14th, 2019, I had gotten a call that the prosecutor was taking the Dallas cases to the grand jury, and that was a Tuesday morning. It also so happened it was the day a tree my husband and I had purchased to have planted at our church's playground was coming in memory of my mother. So, and it was also Bible study day. So I'm at church, waiting on the tree guy to come, looking at my watch thinking it's 9 o'clock, they're presenting the case. And then I go in and I'm trying to focus on Exodus and I'm still looking at my watch. And again, that sense of peace that I had experienced with my sister's procedure, at about 10:45, it just washed right over me. Don't need to be anxious, a calm. When the prosecutor called me later the afternoon to let me know that the indictment had come through, I said, could you tell me about what time the grand jury came back? Was it anywhere around 10:45? He said, well, let me look. And he came back and he said, I was thinking it was earlier than that, but I checked my notes and everything, and when I got back on my laptop, and yeah, 10:45 is about the right time. So again, I have to believe that was God telling me he has this, that this is not, I believe I am his tool here. In terms of bad things happening,
Yes.
bad things are earthly things. God did not create these criminals who hurt my mother and my sister. They were here. They're earthly. The Lord is here to shepherd us through when those bad things happen. I do not believe that he let that happen, or he planned that to happen, or but he was there immediately to hold us and scoop us up. And when you're in those dark moments, I've had it impressed upon me, and it takes time to accept, that in those dark moments are when you need to stop and look to the Lord and look for his lessons of hope and love. They're always there, no matter what. It may take a little bit. And I believe you should come to the Lord as your honest self. If you're angry, let him know you're angry. If you're content, give thanks. But he can only help you if he sees you as you are.
Right.
And you had just mentioned there's a friend of yours who recently lost a child.
Yes.
And again, the Lord was able to use you to speak comfort and peace.
After my sister going through cancer, I came to the belief the only good thing about going through bad things is helping the next person. So, yes, a friend of mine unexpectedly lost her 19-year-old daughter, and in messaging her, I told her, let him see your anger, yell at him, because he can't help you unless your pain is obvious and it's there, and it won't go away and leave you unless you exhibit it. Otherwise, it just sits there and festers. So it's important to let her know, and she appreciated that.
And the first step in relieving that pain is turning to God, but you have to know that there is a God,
Right.
and that he loves you, and that he sent his only son to die for you, so that the blood of Jesus Christ can cover you and allow you to come into a right relationship with God the Father. Without Jesus in your life, you will always struggle. You will always feel inadequate. You will always feel purposeless. You will always feel all the emotions that we feel. But with Jesus Christ in the center of your life, you know that you're never alone. He's with you always to the ends of the earth, and you will spend eternity with him. And I know that's got to be a comfort for you, that Nancy and your mom and hopefully these others, that they are spending time right now with Jesus Christ. They wouldn't want to come back to this
No.
earth even if they could.
Right.
They are content, they are at peace, they are whole, they are worshiping God. They're in a place that he created that we can't even imagine. But we can't get there unless we know Jesus Christ, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other way to God but through Jesus. And with Jesus in our lives, all things can be used for good. And so we've heard an incredible story, sad as it is, traumatic as it is. God is using it for good because Jesus is the center of Shannon's life, and we want Jesus to be the center of your life. Won't you bow your head and pray and just ask Jesus to come into your life? Your words, your way, whether it's through tears, whether it's through pain or whatever. Just like Shannon said, he already knows you. He knows what you're dealing with. He's just waiting on you to invite him to come into your life and be the Lord of your life. That's why we do this show, so that you can hear real stories of the difference that God makes in our lives. We want you to be a child of God. Thank you so much, Shannon,
Thank you for
being
having
on our
us.
show.
Thank
Your
you.
story is so important because it just shows how you took this thing and you made it beautiful in the sense that it can help so many people.
That's the Lord's hand.
Yes, and you have a story to tell, and we'd love to tell your story. If you would like to reach out to Shannon and talk to her more, she is available. You can reach her at sgdion@msn.com. sgdion, D-I-O-N, @msn.com. And again, her website is in front of you on the screen. You can look up her website, find out more information about how you can secure the safety of the seniors in your life. But most of all, we want you to tell your story. We would love to publish your story. If you would submit your story in writing to info@roaringlambs.org in about 2,500 to 3,500 words, we would love the opportunity to read your story and help tell the world about what Jesus has done for you. So make it a great day. Go out and tell somebody about Jesus and roar about the goodness of our God.
At Life Stories Company, our passion is to preserve your story in a personal memoir. These beautiful books can be shared with both friends and family for generations. For the past 28 years, we have helped over 200 clients share their history and wisdom. As a Christian, what better testimony than to share how God has led you and provided for you? Visit us at lifestoriescompany.com. Sharing your story and honoring God, lifestoriescompany.com.